Real Talk 49. How to make a reservation at a restaurant. Have you ever tried making a reservation at a restaurant and it just didn't go as smoothly as you'd have liked? Then tune into this Real Talk episode where Andrew and Cassie teach you all the questions, answers, and expressions you need to know to make a reservation at a restaurant in perfect English. Some restaurants have reservations lists that are beyond the imagination. Beyond the imagination. 상상 이상도. Lists that have reservation lists that are beyond the imagination. 상상 이상이다. Are beyond the imagination. One such restaurant is owned and run by Chef Damon Better. This chef is unique because he runs his restaurant out of his home and he goes through every process of the food prep, from growing his own produce to preparing it, cooking it, serving it, and even cleaning the dishes. He prepares a 20-plus course meal for each guest, and the dining experience is said to take him between 5 to 7 hours. At one point, Chef Battle had a 6-year wait list of customers dying to eat at his restaurant. Hello friends, welcome back to Q-Lips. You're listening to Real Talk. Real Talk is the series where we teach you the English expressions that you need to know for real-world situations. And today, we're going to teach you how to make dinner reservations at a restaurant. Teach you how to make dinner reservations at a restaurant. Now, I just said we're going to teach you. That means I'm joined by somebody else. So I should introduce my co-host for this episode. It's Cassie. Hi there, Cassie. How's it going? I'm doing great, Andrew. Thanks. Perfect. Cassie. We also wanted to give a shout out to one of our listeners from Belarus, Victoria, who recently left us a 5-star rating and a nice review on Apple Podcasts. And Victoria left us such a kind message. Cassie, would you mind reading it for us all? Sure. So Victoria says, "Hi there, I'm from Belarus and I came across this podcast a few weeks ago. I came across this podcast a few weeks ago. I really enjoy listening to it since there are a huge number of different topics covered." Hi there, I'm from Belarus and I came across this podcast a few weeks ago. I really enjoy listening to it since there are a huge number of different topics covered. I usually do it on my way to work or home. It's quite easy to understand and it really helps to enrich the vocabulary and listening skills. I also like hearing your pleasant voices. Thanks for doing a great job. Thanks, Victoria. Yeah, thanks Victoria for that nice review. And listeners, if you'd like to hear yourself at the start of an upcoming Culips episode, we would love to give you a shout out. So to do that, just leave us a 5-star rating and a nice review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we will try to mention you in an upcoming episode. All right. So let's get into our episode for today. Cassie, could you tell us what exactly we are going to cover? Yes, so we are going to be listening to a conversation between a restaurant host and a person who wants to dine at the restaurant. And we are going to be learning key phrases and questions that you might come across if you were to make a reservation. Exactly. So if anyone ever has to make a reservation for a restaurant in English in the future, this is going to be the perfect episode for you. And this is something that I think a lot of our listeners will maybe have to do at some point in their lives if they are travel to an English-speaking country or just travel in general to a place where they don't speak the local language and the kind of international language that is used is English. So first up, we'll listen to the conversation and then we'll break it down and explain all of the key expressions that you listeners need to know. So let's take a listen to that conversation now. Let's do it. This is the Mystique. Oh, hello. I'd like to make a reservation for 2 this Saturday. All right. And what time will you be joining us this evening? I prefer something between 7:30 and 8, if that's available. Okay, let me see. We only have outside seating on the deck available at that time. Will that work for you? Sure, yeah, that will be fine. Okay, then I will put you down as a party of 2 for 7:30, correct? I will put you down as a party of 2 for 7:30. As a party of 2. Perfect. And under whose name are you making the reservation? McGrady. Okay, thank you, Mr. McGrady. We'll see you on Saturday night. All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, listeners. So we just heard a conversation between the host at the restaurant who takes reservations and does customer service and that kind of thing at the restaurant, and a customer who would like to visit the restaurant on Saturday evening. The customer was making a reservation. So, Cassie, why don't we go through this conversation now and highlight some of the important language that was used in order to successfully make that reservation? Yeah, I think we should definitely start with the very first thing. The person making the reservation said, which was, I'd like to make a reservation for 2 this Saturday. I'd like to make a reservation for 2 this Saturday. Exactly. So there's 2 things in this sentence that you may need to change depending on your situation, right? There's 2 things in this sentence that you may need to change. You may need to change. depending on your situation. Depending on your situation. Depending on your situation. So there are two things in this sentence that you may need to change depending on your situation, right? When we say for two, it means for two people. But if you had maybe a larger family or a larger get-together, and you had more people, then you would need to change that number, of course, right? I'd like to make a reservation for 4. I'd like to make a reservation for 6. Like that. Exactly. And then the second part you might want to change is the day. So in this example, it was a reservation for 2 this Saturday. But maybe you would have it on a Sunday or a Friday or a Wednesday. And it might even be next week. So you might not say this Saturday. You might not say this Saturday, meaning the week that you are on currently. But it could be for the following week, for the next week. So I'd like to make a reservation for 3 next Wednesday, something like that. Exactly. I mean, some really fancy restaurants even require reservations, like a month in advance, right, Andrew? A month in advance. Oh yeah, absolutely. So you might have to say your ideal time, but if that time is booked and busy, then they might say, oh, sorry, we are busy at that time. The earliest we could squeeze you in would be next month, something like that. So if they are busy, they would suggest the soonest available time that you could visit, and you'd just have to go from there. Exactly. And Andrew, what's our next expression? Well, the customer says when he would like to make the reservation and how many people will be in that party. We call this a party. The people who will visit the restaurant are a party. So he says it's a party of 2. They want to visit on Saturday, and then the host asks, what time in the evening will you be joining us? So what time will you be joining us that evening? And this is just a question that everyone should expect to be asked, because it is important for the restaurant to know what time will you visit so that they can get prepared for you. This is just a question that everyone should expect to be asked. Everyone should expect. This is just a question that everyone should expect to be asked, because it is important. Everyone should expect should be expect to be asked. This is just a question that everyone should expect to be asked, because it is important for the restaurant to know what time you will visit so that they can get prepared for you. So you would just choose a ballpark time that you'd like. In this case, it was between 7:30 and 8. You could say you wanted earlier time, like 5 o'clock, or later 9 o'clock. It all depends on what you need. And Cassie, you just need an interesting expression there, a ballpark. So a ballpark time or a ballpark figure is just an estimation, right? It's not like I will be at the restaurant exactly at 7:35 p.m. It's more like a window, a gap of time, like between 7:30 and 8. And that is usually how we will make a reservation. Exactly. So following that the host checks her computer and sees that actually the restaurant is full, but they do have some space outside on the deck. So they have outside sitting on the deck. Some restaurants will also call this area the patio. So you might hear deck. You might hear patio. Both are common. Both are common. And that just means sitting outside of the restaurant. These days, because of COVID in North America, many restaurants have actually switched the layout of the restaurant to more of an outdoor dining area. So I think it's probably pretty common these days that many people are eating on the decks and patios. So yeah, this is something that is kind of a new trend, but very popular these days. Yeah, that's right. I think especially in the summertime, this is popular anywhere, COVID or no COVID. Yeah, I love it. Personally, I like eating outside. Patios are awesome in my opinion. And then the customer confirms, yeah, that's okay. I'd like to sit on the patio, no problem. So the host responds by saying, I will put you down as a party of 2 for 7:30, correct? I will put you down as a party of 2 for 7:30, correct? And this is just the way to confirm that she has the information correct. Cassie, we talked about this party of 2, right? Could you just remind us one more time what this means, party of 2? Yeah, so your party isn't, like a fiesta, dancing and food kind of party. Yeah, so your party isn't, like a fiesta, dancing and food kind of party. This kind of party is how many members are eating together in your group. So a party of 2 would be 2 people dining together. All right, and then the last question, the last important piece of information that the host needs is the customer's name. So she asks, under whose name are you making the reservation? Under whose name are you making the reservation? And the customer responds, McGrady. And the host knows that this is the last name. So Cassie, usually when you get asked this question, would you respond with your first name or your last name, or both? How would you answer this question? This is really funny. I've never made many reservations, but the few things I have, it would always be my last name. Always your last name. Yeah, I might give my first name or my last name in this situation, but I don't think we would give just our first names, right? Somebody said, under whose name are you making this reservation? Oh, Cassie or Andrew. Especially Andrew, my name is really common. It's one of the top names for boys in my generation. I think it's the fourth most popular boy's name from the 1980s. when I was born. So if I say Andrew, it's too common. I need to say my first name and my last name, or just my last name, just to make sure I don't get confused with any other potential customers. Yeah, this might be different in other countries. I'm curious to hear what listeners might have to say, because in countries like Korea, where we live, or maybe even India, or maybe China too, like there's a few names that are really, 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 really popular. So if you just give your last name on a reservation, 10 people might have the same last name making a reservation. Yeah, if you're like from Asia, for example, maybe from China or Korea, and your family name was Lee, and you just said Lee, it might be too common. There might be potential other customers that have that same family name, so you might have to leave your full name just to be safe. Yes, that's not as much of an issue in Western countries like Canada or the US. So Andrew, we actually have a part 2 to this conversation, correct? Yeah, that's correct. So in part 2, we're going to hear a follow-up where the customer calls the restaurant again, calls the mystic, and just confirm his reservation. So let's listen to part 2 of this conversation now. This is the Mystique. Hello, I'm just calling to confirm my reservation for tomorrow night. What's the name under the reservation? Under whose name? What's the name under the reservation? McGrady. Yes, we have you here as a party of 2, 7:30 on the patio. That's correct? Yes, that's right. And I know it's the last minute, but would it be possible to push our reservation up just a bit to like 6:30? I think we can squeeze you in then, but it will have to be a high top near the bar. Is that alright with you? Yeah, sure, that's fine. Thanks again for fitting us in earlier. No problem, sir. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow night. Okay. Like we said, this is a follow-up conversation. It's sometimes customary for people to call back the night before, just to make sure their reservation is on the books. You don't want to show up and then find out your reservation was basically erased or something. So the person calls back and he make his first expression, which is, I'm calling to confirm my reservation for tomorrow night. I'm calling to confirm my reservation for tomorrow night. Exactly. So if we think about it a bit, this customer actually doesn't want to confirm his reservation. He wants to change his reservation, but he's kind of breaking the ice and just making sure first that the reservation was made and that there were no errors and that was actually written in the reservation book, as you mentioned, Cassie. So he confirms first by saying, hello, I'm calling to confirm my reservation for tomorrow night. And then the host and the customer confirm the reservation, everything's okay. And then he asks the question that he originally called for, right? He says, would it be possible to push our reservation up to 6:30? Okay, would it be possible to do blah blah blah? It's just a really polite way to ask a question. So, would it be possible to push our reservation up to 6:30? Push up is the phrasal verb. And this is a phrasal verb that can be separated. You can put the object of the sentence in between push and up. So push what? Push our reservation up to 6:30, meaning to move it an hour earlier in the day. Yeah, the opposite of push back. Right, push back would be if you wanted to show up maybe at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, right? Then you could say, could we push our reservation back? But if push up, push back, push you up, push back. But if you want to change it to earlier, then you could say we could push our reservation up. Exactly, when there's a lot of requests that you can make that aren't in this example conversation, such as, would it be possible to get a window seat? Or would it be possible to get a booth? Would it be possible to have a birthday song for my grandmother? It's her birthday tomorrow, something like that. Would it be possible to add an extra person to our reservation? Could we change it from 2 people to 3 people, or 2 people to 4 people, something like that? So yeah, you're right. You can use this kind of question pattern to ask about many different kinds of changes. Good. So after he asked that question, the host says a really cool phrase. I think we can squeeze you in. I think we can squeeze you in. Andrew, what does squeeze you in mean? Yeah, so if you squeeze somebody in, it means that you make space available for them enough, even though they are very, very busy, right? So the reservation, you can imagine, at this time is very busy. There aren't too many extra tables available, but the host will make a special accommodation and they will be able to welcome them for dinner at that time. So squeeze in just means fit into a very busy schedule or a very busy situation. Accommodation. And in this case, they had to switch where they were sitting to, right, Andrew? Instead of being on the patio, they are sitting to a high top near the bar, which are usually just like small tables that are high off the ground, where only about 2 people can sit at usually. Yeah, so it's more like bar seating instead of regular dining seating. So maybe not as comfortable, but I guess the restaurant is too busy at the time, so that's the only table available. So the customer agrees, yeah, no problem, that will do. That's fine. That's fine. And then he says, thanks for fitting us in. And that just means thanks for making a special accommodation for us, even though the restaurant is very busy. Thanks for making room for us in this busy situation. That is fitting us in this context. Okay, so we're almost at the end of today's episode, but before we go, let's summarize what we've covered. Alright, so today we learned about how to make dinner reservations over the phone at a restaurant using English. We learned how to make a reservation and common questions that may come up when making a reservation over the phone, such as, I'd like to make a reservation for blank people tonight. Yeah, I'd like to make a reservation for 2 tonight. Or we also learned, okay, what time will you be joining us that evening? We also learned the expressions such as party, the number of people who are dining together, and seating such as outdoor seating, patio seating, or high top seating. And we learned the useful expressions for confirming an existing reservation, such as I'm calling to confirm my reservation for tomorrow night. And finally, we learned ways to modify an already existing reservation. For example, would it be possible to push up my reservation to so-and-so time to 6:30? That's all for now. Talk to you next time.